This is Life Burst.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Sarah. Today, another incredible story of courage and of perseverance, and we are so excited to have her sharing on the show today. This is Life Burst.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Sarah. Welcome to the show today.
It is really good you could join us.
Yeah.
And we love bringing stories to you of local people from across Australia who have a story to tell. We all have a story. And today is no exception as we share and hear from a story that there's so much in, a story of perseverance and courage.
That's right. So on today's show, we have the one and only... I don't know which way to look because she's not here with us today. She's on video, so it's
Kel,
there.
Joining us online. G'day, Kel.
Hey guys, how you going? Thank you so much for having me with you today.
It's very exciting. I know we're very excited to have you. So tell us at the very beginning, take us back to the very beginning of your life. Where did life start out for you?
Well, right from the beginning, it was a bit tough for my poor mama bear. She had a pretty rough life herself, and so she had me as a single mum. She was all of 16 years of age. So it started out a bit tough in the beginning, but she married a lovely fella called Kevin, and we ended up moving out into the bush in Queensland in a little place called Brewarrine, and it's still where I call home. Amongst the gum trees and lots of plum trees and a sheep or two and a kangaroo.
Where is that?
But Brewarrine, it is, like in the middle of nowhere. if you blink, you'll miss it on the highway. It's about 45 minutes south of Gladstone in Queensland, on the way to sort of Brisbane, I guess. It's not really in the middle. Delete that. No, it's
somewhere around there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like 45 minutes south of Gladstone on the Bruce Highway, so it's a very small place. We basically had our family home there, and we still have our family home there. So it's where I spend all my time now, and I am about to move, but this will always be home. And you know, it was a beautiful upbringing. We pretty much grew up in a little caravan. We had, baths in buckets and in the runoff from the rainwater tanks. It was such a beautiful, innocent, fun. There was camping and fishing, and we'd spend our weekends just doing the things that kids can only dream of these days. Sometimes, I think it's a real struggle for kids these days with social media and, being attached to their devices. And, we didn't have any of that growing up. Like, I'm not that old. I'm about to hit 40, but not yet. I'm not there yet. I'm still in my 30s, technically. But, it was a beautiful time of complete innocence, I want to say. And that growing up was, I think, a big part of the resilience that I know that I have today, because we didn't get everything. We didn't take things for granted, It was very sweet, innocent, didn't want for anything because we couldn't afford it. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. We were rich in many things, but not in wealth. We were very safe, very cared for. There's had some great memories of having mud fights with my brother and throwing cow poo at each other. And I can count the number of times I was in hospital for falling off my bike or getting stitches or breaking something. It was a very long waits in the emergency department.
I was going to say, what other types of things did you get up to in the middle of nowhere?
Oh, well, besides throwing mud at each other and cow poo.
Yeah.
Oh, look, we just, build cubby houses, and I was a very good athlete as a young person. And I remember my dad would say to me to get out in the yard and train, and the only thing I could hurdle was a barbed wire fence. So, I
Oh
was a
no.
track and field athlete, and I just hoped that I wouldn't miss. So I made sure I cleared the hurdles. So
That is some real
Yeah.
tough training.
Well done.
Um,
I just remember picking up boulders and using them as shot puts, and using the cattle trails for training, and going down the dam and swimming, and dodging snakes that decided to swim with us sometimes. And it was very scary for probably some people. If you're from America, you'd cringe at some of the creatures we've got here, but we just fall into the fabric of what it is to live as an Aussie bush kid. And it's a beautiful thing. And we're very close to that family. We had a great upbringing in that sense. We cooked on an outdoor fire. We'd have family come and visit, cousins. We'd had every animal you could think of besides, like stumpy-tailed lizards and kangaroos. And we had a pet crow once that would follow the school bus all the way into school and sit on the port racks and wait for us to finish and follow the school bus back home again until we got home. It just beautiful times. And, my favorite stuff to do was the fishing and the camping. That was the most beautiful part of it. You just completely escape from the world. And it's still what I do today to escape the busyness of life. So
There are definitely some stories that are appropriate to share from that time.
Well, there's I'm sure I can think of several, but I do, unfortunately, I've lost a lot of memories from my childhood because of my story. But there are things that have stood out to me. And mostly it's the joy of spending time with, like, my best friend Mel at the time. And she was like a gift to me. She was just absolutely crazy fun. We used to call each other the worst names under the sun. I'm sure our parents were just like, oh my God, like, I can't believe you would say that, But I remember it was so funny. We would, there's two things that come to mind about the funny stories. And one of them is we used to make these cow poo bongs. And it's basically a Milo tin with little holes in the bottom, and we fill it with cow poo and light it up so that we can get rid of all the mosquitoes, right? Because when you're out camping and there's sandflies and mozzies, you need to take care of the mozzies and stuff like that. So we light it up and it just smoke, and we would wander around with this cow poo bong all day, and just laughing, like innocent fun, and calling each other silly names. And it was just,
Did it work?
it was one of
Did it work?
Keep the sandflies off?
Yes, absolutely. There's total,
you heard it here.
like, cow poo works for everything. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Heard it's good for the skin too. No.
Yeah.
Get all that into you.
Your words, not ours.
Take it or leave it, the advice that's given here on Life.
This is 40-year-old skin, all right?
Hey, look,
Righto.
now your training methods there, obviously we brought you in because you're now an elite athlete playing for Australia, but that didn't quite work out for you, obviously.
No, look.
But as a young person, in those early years, did you have some sense of what you'd hope to be when you grew up, what you wanted to do?
Definitely. Look, I always dreamed of being an Olympian. That was my heart. And I guess it could get a little bit complicated as I try and explain it, but I think it's what saved me from what I was experiencing, because and this is the Unscathed Beauty story. And I was sexually abused by my uncle from the age of 8 until 15. So that obviously changed life for me as I knew it. And I was an athlete from about the age of 9 or 10, and I threw myself into my sport. And when I say threw, it was sport and being a bush kid, and that was like my life, I mean, I had friends and we used to do lots of stuff and hang out and all that sort of thing, you know, but it was tough because I had this dark side of things that were going on, but my sport and this dream that I had just, and I call it shards of light. And in my book, I talk a lot about these people that would come along on my journey, and they're just like beacons of hope and love, and they just come in and make you forget about everything that's going on that's difficult and tough. And sport and athletics, so track and field and running and shot put and discus and javelin and hurdles and all those types of things, they were all part of this I guess distraction from what was happening in my life. So
that's right. This
yeah.
is Life First with Matt and Sarah. We'll be back straight after this. This is Life Burst with Matt and Sarah. And I just want to mention a couple of numbers because while we're talking, if any of this brings up anything and you want to have a chat with someone, there's 1-800-RESPECT or there's LifeLine, which is 13 11 14, that you can call and talk to any time of day or night.
Now, Kel, we're talking your story. You've mentioned an idyllic upbringing, but also you've alluded to something that happened to you that changed the trajectory of your life. We notice your book behind you as well. You've mentioned that. So the next part of your story you pick up in this book, which is a memoir. Where did life go from here?
Yeah, so Unscathed Beauty, this is my book here. It's the cover really sort of says it all. It's trying to break free from the dark stuff, I guess. And I just mentioned earlier about the shards of light, and it's the people that come along in your life that, you know, I call them light bulb people, or, you know, that really make a difference and support you on the way, even if they don't know what's going on. They just love you unconditionally, and we sometimes forget who those people are in our life when we're struggling. So but yeah, and my uncle was one of those people. He was one of our favorite uncles. He spent a lot of time with our family, and if we know anything about pedophiles or child sex offenders, they groom you and they groom your family. And sometimes in that whole process, we forget that that's actually happening, and so we blame ourselves, and families blame themselves for things that happen to their children because they believe it's their fault. But like my uncle, who spent a lot of time with us, he spent a lot of time with my family, and so it's through that grooming process and spending time with us and helping us at home. And you know, we were building our dream home, and my mum and dad's vision of having this beautiful farmhouse. And you know, because we just had this block of land, and we grew up so, like I said, innocently and playing, and like, you know, we would bath under the runoff of the rainwater tanks, and we didn't have internet, and you know, it was just so wonderful. And my uncle would come down and help build our big house, and we'd go fishing and we'd go camping with them and spend this time with them. And it was during those times and in getting to know my uncle and him spending time with us that he would, you know, read stories, and we'd stay overnight with them. And you know, because I have a brother and I have a sister as well, and we're all 5 years apart, with my sister being the youngest at 10 years difference between her and I. And so you know, things started with me when I was about 8. That was the first thing that happened. And I very specifically remember it, even though I was so young. I remember that first moment, and it was being innocent, being a child, and running around in my underwear. And you know, he said, "Come here, I want to teach you what it's like to love." And it was from that point that he started to sexually abuse me. So that continued from 8 up until I was 15. And it's very hard for many people to talk about it, and it's very hard for people to hear. But I talk about it because it opens up avenues of conversation that need to be had. And through having these conversations, the number of people that have disclosed and come forward and shared their story has been more than I could ever have hoped for. And when I first thought that I would share Unscathed Beauty, share this story, I didn't imagine the impact that talking about this tough stuff would have, because it was so hard for me to even begin to talk about this. And
Mm.
in order to understand that, you really do need to read the book. But just that there's a few things within it that will silence it, you know, because there's so much fear around being found out, and that comes from the offender themselves. And you know, spending so much time with them, and the offending that's happening makes you feel so dirty and ashamed, and you don't want to talk about that out loud. You don't want to say what's happening because you've got these little seeds that have been embedded into your head from the predator that, you know, if you do speak up, you're going to break up your family, or you know, you're going to get me in trouble, or you're going to be in trouble, or they're not going to love you anymore, they're going to abandon you. And within all of this, like, not everything that I just said was a thought that I had, but it was something that I felt. It wasn't something that he necessarily said, but because I felt ashamed of what was happening, it just becomes this embedded process in your mind that you just believe it because it's what they've done. It's what the perpetrator has done to you. And so, you know, I had my sport, and I had these outlets for everything that was going on, but I still had this darkness that was happening on the other side.
Yes. When you were 8, did you know what was happening to you? And before you answer that question, just want to remind people of 1-800-RESPECT or 13 11 14 for LifeLine if you would like to speak about anything to anyone that we're discussing today. So, yeah, did you know what was happening to you when you were 8?
I didn't really, and I didn't have an awareness so much of, I mean, I didn't know specifically like that it was right or wrong, but I felt funny, and I didn't know what those feelings meant. And I didn't have a language around what was going on in order to say, hey, this is what's happening to me. And it wasn't until I was 12 that I realized how wrong it was. But by then, I'd already been well and truly groomed, and then I was stuck in this cycle. So, you know, it's very difficult for a lot of people to identify something that becomes normalized. And
Now, was it just you, or were there your siblings as well?
No, well, my siblings were a lot younger than me at the time. My brother was only 3, and my sister wasn't born when this first happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't until much later that, and then I knew that it was wrong, that I became concerned about perhaps what he might do to my sister or family. And so, but by then I had obviously worked out a few things, and I'd started to, like, I did try to talk to people, but it was very much like I tested the waters. And you do this, and I keep referring to myself a bit like a turtle, you know, I stick my head out and then put my head back in my shell because I'm like, oh, you know, I don't know if anyone's going to believe me, or, you know, and we do that. I'll just like, it reminds me of my cat when she's trying to get out of the cat flap. She'll like stick her head out and have a look around and see if it's safe, and then she'll, you know, hide again. So, you know, and I laugh because, I mean, I could commiserate over it for the rest of my life and be like, man, I should have said this and should have said that, but I didn't. And there's reasons, and that's why I do what I do now. So, you know, you need safe spaces to talk, and I just didn't feel safe. Not because my parents were unsafe people, not because I was in an unsafe home, but I didn't feel emotionally safe. And I didn't have the words, and I didn't have the language around that. And that's why early intervention and teaching your kids is so important. And to name your body parts as the correct body parts, like penis and vagina. Like, you must teach children at a very young age, to be able to say that, because incorrect disclosures means cases get lost in court. That's just how it is. Yeah. So we must be talking about the naming of our body parts. And, you know, well, when I first, something happened to me, I got sweaty and I was scared and I had butterflies in my stomach. But what does that mean? And teaching kids what fear looks like, and that it's okay when you're afraid, and, you know, creating that safe space to come forward and have a conversation with you about what's happening in their life.
Well, thank you for being so honest already. You know, we're only like part 2 of part 5 through our interview, but thank you for being so open and honest with your sharing with us so far. it's really special to have this type of privilege to be able to share these stories. So thank you.
Mm.
No, that's all right. And look, I'm happy to, because if this conversation is heard by one child or one family that's struggling, then I know that it's absolutely worth it, because we need to have these conversations. And it's all said from complete love from my heart, because I know what it's like. And I know what my family's experienced because of it, and it's just why I do what I do. So
Well done.
and likewise, you're giving out those phone numbers. I'm not a crisis support service or anything like that, but I have a lot of information that I can help with. And if anyone has questions, I'm happy to take questions. So
Yeah. Well, Mel, Kel, when we come back, we'd love to hear what's given you that courage to go from that experience to where you are now. So this is Life Bursts with Sarah and Matt. Don't go away.
This is Life Bursts with Matt and Sarah. And if anything that we're talking about today is bringing up anything that you want to talk to someone about, we've got 1-800-RESPECT that you can call, or 13 11 14 for LifeLine. And you can call both of those numbers anytime during the day or at night.
This is Life Burst. We're chatting to Kel, and hearing a story of such impact as a young person being sexually abused. And you've alluded to the fact that, Kel, it was a darkness that you carried through that as well. But at a certain point, you had the courage to speak up about what was happening. Tell us what led you to that.
Yeah, well, that didn't happen until I was about 19, actually. It took me quite a long time to find that courage. But there was this one opportunity where I was 12, and like I mentioned earlier, I did find out eventually at some point that what was happening to me was quite wrong. But the penny didn't really drop until that moment. And there was a conversation with my mother at the sink, and she gets really cranky when she's washing up, and she's thinking, and she's like one of those slammers, and she's like slamming the dishes in the sink. But she just kind of whirled around to me, and she's like, "Has your uncle ever touched you?" And I was just like, "Whoa, hang on." And I remember that moment, I just froze. And this, when you get this, I call it a shame wash. And I had the shame wash, and I had like prickly hands and sweaty like palms, and I just felt so sick. And I was the first opportunity that I had to say something, and I thought, this is the moment. This is what I need to do. And then I couldn't speak. I just actually had no physical ability to speak. And I said no, and then I just ran off, and I ran up into the garden. And that was the first time I actually had thought about suicide. I just didn't want to be there anymore. I felt disgusting. I felt dirty. It was just horrible. And I remember in the shower that night just wanting to wash myself clean of everything. And I knew beyond all reasonable doubt that it was all lies. It was all wrong. And I think that's when my difficulties really, really started, with trying to balance my mental health and my focus on my sport. And I think it just made me push harder and harder. And it's why I'm so busy all the time now. I just keep doing stuff so I don't have to sit still and think about those things. And it wasn't until I was 19, and by then I had a very successful sporting career, Australian level athlete. I traveled over Australia, traveled internationally, in multiple sports, and I just drove myself. And it was like I said, it was what saved me, I believe. But it wasn't until I was 19 that I started having these repeated nightmares. And when I say repeated, it was horrible. And it was me. I was dreaming of my little sister, and she's so petite and pretty and beautiful. She's got the most stunning blue eyes. She's got blonde hair. We don't look anything alike. She got the pretty genes and I didn't. But she's gorgeous. But she was running and running in my dream, and it's just like, when the kids are running through the wheat field, and there's like this beautiful shining sun, but there was something dark and it was chasing her, and I could feel it. And then I couldn't find her. I couldn't find her anywhere. And I just remember And again, this dream repeated to me every night for like months on end. And I remember standing at this fountain and then looking down into the fountain, and then I could see her, and she was staring up at me, these big, beautiful blue eyes, but she was trying to talk, but she didn't have words. And then I looked up, and across from me at the fountain was my uncle, and I knew he was coming for her. Uh, that was hard, and I wrestled with myself, and I wrestled with telling my parents about this, and I just had to. And then the other part of this is I was very good at my sport. I was doing soccer and competing at my best athletics that I've been doing, and I ended up getting hit by a car. I got hit by a car, and I broke my leg, and I thought my world was over. There was two big catalysts here, and I felt like I couldn't do anything with my life anymore. I had all these dreams of going to America, going to college in the United States, and I thought it was all over. That was it. And I was sitting down and talking to my coach at the school, and it just fell out of my mouth what had happened. There was no plan to tell anyone. I just could not cope anymore. I was so depressed and so anxious. I'd get lost on the most simple route, and then I'd be so confused. I was diagnosed with depression and a whole bunch of other stuff, and I just was so lost. And she said to me, she's like, Kel, I can't help you. She said, but I'm going to find somebody who can. And that's when it all started. And so we'd made an agreement to speak to the police. But before I did that, I had to tell mum and dad.
And how did that go? And how did that
Yeah, it was
unfold?
horrible. It was bloody horrible.
Mm.
But all those fears, that's those fears that come up inside of you when you want to talk about something like this. Like, they're not going to love me. They're not going to be there for me. They're going to think I'm this disgusting, horrible person who's been doing this stuff with someone who's meant to be, my uncle and caring person in our family. And all these emotions come up, and I think the biggest thing is, like, we long, particularly as or any of us, anyone as a child or even as an adult, we just want to be loved and cared for and nurtured and just to be held. And I'd always gone to bed and I just wanted my mum to just take it all away. I dreamed of, like, feeling that safety and that connection where I didn't have to worry about any of this stuff. And to think that me sharing this would potentially, like, I was never going to have that, or I was going to lose all that, was really tough. And it's something I think that we create for ourselves, because by speaking up, it brings up all this uncomfortable stuff, and we don't want to be uncomfortable because that makes us feel unsafe. But when we step into it and we can own it and we can actually speak up, it's most of the time that this false reality that we create. And so when I did finally talk to mum and dad and I shared what had happened, I cried. Yeah, I sobbed and I sobbed, but she held me and she said, I never wanted this to happen to you because it happened to me too. And I've never told anyone.
Wow.
What a powerful moment.
It was beautiful.
Has ultimately shaped who you have become today.
Absolutely.
And if anyone is sitting in a similar place to anything that we've discussed, there's LifeLine 13, 11, 14. If you want to take that first step and you want to speak up and speak out about what's happened to you, then give them a call. And they are there for you day and night. And we'll be back with more Life Bursts straight after this.
This is Life Burst. We are chatting to Kel, and Kel, thank you for being so courageous in sharing what you do. You can see the impact in sharing that it had at that point in your life where you finally did. What gave you the courage to continue to share and to be now an advocate for others, sharing in a big and bold way?
Yeah, look, there's lots of reasons, I think, and I know that when I spoke up, I mean, I know that I saved my sister, right? So there's a couple of reasons. One, because I don't believe there's a plan B for me. I remember when I was 12 and I got in trouble because I was staring off into space and crying, and Mum's like, "What's wrong with you?" And she's like, "Come on, let's go. We got to get out to the shop, you know." But I specifically remember I was having a vision, right? And I'm a visionary. That's who I am, and I'm a creative, and that's hard on its own. But I just remembered, and I was only probably 12 or 13. I must have been, and I just remember speaking to a sea of people, and I was so inspired by what was in my mind. I was, you know, there was tears in my eyes, and it's never left me. That vision has never left me. The thought has never left me that I would one day speak about this, and all the other little girls and boys would be okay. And that was what was in my head at that time as a young person. I don't know what that was going to look like, and I've held that vision for forever since that point in time. And it hasn't left me, and I don't feel I have been left. You know, I have a very big faith mission in this, and I continually keep my eyes on that one moment and just keep walking towards it, even if I don't know where my feet are going to land, and even if it's hard. I just keep going, and sometimes it just takes me longer, and sometimes I really suck and I don't want to get out of bed and do it, but I know that I have to do this. This is not an option, because when I stop doing it, or I get this niggling anxiety, and I know that I'm not then in alignment with what I'm meant to be doing. So it's to keep with that vision and that passion from then, and it will be my life's work. It will be what I continue to do. So you know, I do it through this. I do it as a police officer. I you know, will continue on this path, and I don't want it to happen to other people. I don't want them to have to go through what I experienced, but more than that, it's about empowering our children to be able to make safe disclosures, our families to provide that safe space for those disclosures, so we are educated, because it doesn't get better, but we have to get better, because it doesn't go away. So we just need to be strong. We need to be able to speak up, and we need to be able to share what's going on in safe spaces and have these big conversations.
And what would you say to people who are going through or have experienced that, or suspect others are going through something similar? What action should they take apart from finding someone to talk to?
Look, there's lots of ways you can report, and I would encourage reporting, because unfortunately, child sex offenders don't usually just have one victim. It's a repeated pattern of behaviors, and they target more than one person. There's lots of stuff around that I could continue to talk to you about, but the most important thing is to, one, a lot of people don't feel like they can speak up because they're in an unsafe situation. So what I would say is to get yourself into a position where you can speak to someone who is safe, or take yourself to a safe space, so you can disclose, or you can report about what's going on. If you're not sure, sometimes a lot of people ask me because they're worried about other families, or they think that something's going on, is call your local child safety department or police. You can always ask for welfare checks and things like that. So, you know, and obviously, like, I'm an ambassador for Brave Hearts and for Child Safe Australia, and most organisations these days have mandatory reporting, and so sometimes those disclosures come out in, you know, we're in sporting clubs and all that sort of stuff. So make sure that whoever you're around is trained, and, like, you know, ask your sporting clubs, have they got you know, procedures in place for when kids disclose, and Child Safe Australia and Brave Hearts and those organisations can support you with that. So there's lots of things that you can do, but please don't sit in silence. It's hard to speak up, but it's even harder to live with it for the rest of your life and wonder what if.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really want to know about the journey of writing a book. Tell us about
Writing a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's very cathartic. It started as a 3-week. I mean, it took me 3 weeks to write my first draft, and then it took me probably 3 years to get it out. So I had to do some work on me. So for something like this, it's not particularly easy, but it's worth it. And I think everybody's got a book in you, and I do some coaching around that, and I do some coaching around sharing your story. So
Take us through the process. How did it come about? What type of support did you need to put around you? Yeah, take us through that.
Oh, right. Well, look, that is one of the things. Is one of the biggest milestones in this is getting that done, because I am a bit of a creative person, and I sort of start a million projects and don't finish them. So actually committing, committing to writing in the first place, and deciding what it is that you want and what impact you want to have with it. See, I mean, you can just write it. Some people write memoirs for their family because they want to tell their story to their families. I knew I was writing this for a global impact. But for me, it supports what I do. So I talk about it and like, here's my story, read it, you know, because there's lots of stuff that's multi-layered in that. And so the first thing is committing to why you want to write a book, your purpose behind it, and what impact you want to have with it. And it changes how you write, because if you're just writing for your friends and family, it's different. And when I wrote this with that, so many. I wrote it as this: the little Kelly Humphries, the little girl from out in the bush that was scared and afraid. And I wrote it from Kelly Humphries, the police officer who now has 13 years experience in law enforcement. You know, and then I wrote it as somebody. I'm like, all right, if I'm my mum, what do I need to hear from a parent's point of view? How can I protect my child? And then I've written it for, okay, Kelly Humphries in 5 years' time is planning to do this, this, and this. So it's layered, and it has many hats, and you know, knowing what you're doing and the reasons behind it is really important. And then it's picking out the most important parts of your journey that have made the biggest impact on you. It's understanding the lessons behind it and the reasons why it happened. And I'm writing my second book at the moment, and it is about understanding the trauma. So it goes even deeper again into places I didn't even know I could go. And it's very confronting, but it's very safe because of how I write. So, you know, the intention was always there. In the back of my book, I set myself an accountability, and I said, book 2 and 3 are coming soon. Soon, it's still 2 years down the track, but it's coming. So,
that's okay. How do you deal with those things, when those struggles, those hard parts, when you're writing your book and you have to deal with them yourself emotionally and mentally and physically? How do you deal with them?
It's tough sometimes. A lot of people talk about triggers, and triggers being like, oh my God, I can't go there because it's going to trigger me. And, you know, a lot of those things were very difficult in the beginning, but what I say to people about that is, that's your body's way of telling you that you need to deal with something. It's not to scare you. It's not to make you afraid. It's not to shut you down, but that's what we allow to happen when we become triggered. So by being kind to ourselves, like I remember there was one part particularly, it was about how I talked about speaking to my parents, and it didn't sit right with me. And you know, inside yourself, you've got to listen to yourself, that if something's not sitting right, then you need to do something about that. And I could have just ignored that and shut it down and not done anything with it. But I sat with it. I asked myself lots of questions, and I let myself go through that process until it didn't hurt anymore. And so it's just backing yourself. It's trusting yourself, trusting your body to do what your body does, and listening to what your body is saying to you, because it's your greatest teacher. We just refuse to listen and be uncomfortable because we don't want that. Nobody wants to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Kel. This is Life Burst. You're listening to Kel's story here with Sarah and Matt.
This is Life Burst with Matt and Sarah. Thank you for joining us today. Now, continue to take us on your journey. Kel, you've written this book, and it's pretty awesome by the sounds of it from what you've been talking about. So continue the journey on from there. What happened when you finished writing the book?
Yeah, so I started very gently, I guess. I knew in 2015, which is when I started speaking, that I was going to publish this book at some point. And so I thought, well, I better start talking about it then. So I was very lucky, and I gathered support of, I just networked, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just kept following that vision and trusting my instincts. Like if I felt somebody was a good person to connect with, I just connected with them. And Pretty soon I started to develop these like-minded, passionate people. And then I actually joined a Toastmasters at police headquarters, and they were brilliant and very supportive. And I shared one of my first open conversations about my journey with senior police executives at this Toastmasters meeting. And I thought, gosh, if I can do it in front of them, which, you know, the police executive, they're wonderful, but sometimes I get a little bit intimidated because they're you know, big leaders in this organization. I thought, well, if I can do it in front of them, I can do it in front of anybody. So it gave me a lot of courage, and they recognized that too, and nominated me for an International Women's Day Award for courage, which was a beautiful way to look at doing something that I never thought was brave and I never thought was courageous. So it really shaped and gave me what I needed to continue on a journey that I wasn't sure how I was going to take. So, you know, I've just taken opportunities as they've come. I've spoken when I've been asked to, and I've you know, done some online speaking, these types of things. Although I've had a bit of a break for a while, I've got a bit burned out. But yeah, I just continue to speak about what happened and to go deeper into trauma and triggers and why we do what we do. And I'm now writing my second book, which is 10 steps to finding your unscathed beauty. I still don't have a proper title for it, but it's about understanding what happened and why it happened. And because a lot of adult survivors out there really struggle, and they struggle to understand why they behave the certain ways, why we attract the partnerships we attract, boundaries. We struggle with boundaries. We struggle with people pleasing behaviors, and there's so many reasons for all of this stuff that we just don't know, and it's linked directly to what happened as children. So it's a very empowering book. It will be an amazing book, but it's taken me to get to where I am to be able to write that, because I've had to do the work myself. So basically everything I do is and talk about as a reflection of my own journey. So, you know, about getting bigger and growing in myself, which is the best way to help everybody else. So it's just what I keep doing. And I hope to make some big waves shortly. I've just been invited. It's pretty exciting to speak at the National Child Protection Forum in Darwin in July. And I'm sharing my story there, which is very exciting. It's huge for me, a very massive opportunity to shape how child protection is governed in Australia. So that's powerful. It's very powerful.
That is very powerful. It takes a lot of courage to speak up about something when you don't feel supported enough, where you don't feel loved and cared about, which you've shared about before. But how are those people that have known you for a long time and watched you go on this journey, what have they said about you?
Yeah, look, I know my family's very proud, and they have been very supportive from the beginning. It was very hard. We all obviously had our own journeys to go through when I first disclosed about this. You know, mum and dad have had their part to deal with, and, you know, I've obviously had my part to deal with. And it's only when coming back and writing this and being so open about it that we've been able to have these big conversations as a family. And it's still very difficult. And I know that they still nurse their wounds with it. And, you know, that's their part of their journey. But them seeing me happy and seeing me doing what I'm doing is very powerful for them. And I know mum and I appeared on SBS program Insight about difficult conversations and impossible choices. And, you know, she has shared her story also in my book. So it really does go into some generational stuff, because it's very important to understand sometimes how you're speaking up can actually unlock people in their own prisons. You know, there's people waiting to share, but they almost just need someone else to share, which gives them permission. So, you know, that's very much the story with my mother and I. But you know, I've had my partner's incredibly supportive. I've got beautiful friends around me, and I have just releasing, it's UBU, it's an Unscathed Beauty / be yourself in spite of anything that's happened to you. on my website. It's just it's to build a tribe, because you can't do this on your own. You really can't. It's such a big struggle. And so when you find like-minded, passionate people who can support you through your healing process, it makes life so much easier. So UBU is on my website, and it's just about looking after each other and stepping into growth and healing. Because I mean, I have struggled on my own through so much of this stuff, but it's only when I've networked, and it's only when I've been brave enough to speak up and to share what's going on, that I found this support, and I know that I'm not alone. How could I think my whole life that I was alone? Because I didn't speak up, I didn't share. And so it's only when we do that we find solidarity with other people who have struggled, and it makes a big difference.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I know that we've said that continuously, but we really mean it. We really do mean it.
Yeah.
And in the final 2 minutes of our show, what is the one piece of advice that you would like to leave with those today?
Yeah, well, I have this quote that I shared at the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, and it's quite simply that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the power of their voice, and that's the power to speak out of silence and shine out of shame. And the reason that that's such a profound quote is because when we speak up, the shame cannot continue to exist, and it's that shame that keeps us silent, and it's the shame that holds us back and inhibits us from becoming all who we were born to be, in spite of everything that's happened. So, that essentially is why I called my book Unscathed Beauty.
Oh, Kel, thanks so much for that advice, for your honesty in sharing the story. You've given us an insight into not only the things that have happened to you not okay, which we have a sense of, but into the impact that it has on someone, and the impact of opening up and sharing that. That's going to have a huge impact on a lot of people. Where can people find your website if they want to seek out your books and hear more of your story and some of those tools you've talked about?
Yeah, definitely. So it's just kellyhumphries.com. Kelly with a Y, Humphries, Humphiries. I'm sure you can drop it on the comments.
Yeah, it'll be dropped in the links and stuff like that. So thank you once again, Kel, for your time today.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
This has been Life Bursts. You can catch up with us wherever you get your podcasts from, and videos on Facebook and YouTube as well. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Matt. Thanks so much for joining us.
Life Bursts is hosted by Matthew Karat and Sarah Freeman, with production by Reese Jarrett and Kay Hoshraw Ozadigan. For more episodes of Life Bursts, go to rawcut.com.au. This is a RawCut production.